Hello and welcome to another LegacyCast here on the Michigan Sports Legacy Conservancy website. I'm Executive Director Jim Stark, and we're here today to have another sports conversation, not just about today's events, but how they fit into the history of the sports scene here in the state of Michigan. And I'm joined today by a second-time guest, Kurt Kosmowski. Kurt, you came back for a second time. That's always a good sign. I didn't scare you off the first time.
Glad to be back, Jim.
Well, and before we go further, I want to say Kurt Kosmowski is actually a member of our board of directors on the Michigan Sports Legacy Conservancy. And Kurt, we appreciate your support and your commitment to doing what we want to do.
Well, it's great just to tell the story of sports history in Michigan. I mean, it is, I will argue, the best sports state in the country. And, for generations to come, that's what, we're here to try and do, is tell that story and have some fun, but also kind of, educate people in the future that, sports in Michigan was such a great, part of the culture and the fabric of the state.
More so maybe the other areas where, like you say, it's a fabric of everyday life. It's not something you just do. It's something you believe in, something you live, something you breathe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anytime a big event comes to the area, people just, they just get attracted to it and they just become part of it, whether or not really, in a lot of cases, even they're a sports fan. Just the excitement of a major sports event coming to the area and all the fun it brings.
Well, a great segue, Kurt. We just got done with hosting the NCAA first round here at the brand new arena, Little Caesars Arena, and you've been very involved in your career with a lot of these NCAA events. Put it in perspective with a brand new arena, first time in Detroit in that arena, big event. What was your take on how well it worked out and how it was received by the fans?
Yeah, I mean, it was really another first. It was great to have the NCAA first and second rounds here, and Michigan State played in the event. And we also were blessed with incredibly warm weather. And it harkened back to when we had the Final Four here, men's basketball in 2009, and, obviously late March, early April, and it was the same thing. We were blessed with this great weather. So all those folks that came from all over the country here not only, enjoyed the event, but it just, the weather just made it a little bit, more exciting, more fun, more people on the streets, that kind of thing.
Well, and it's a whole new dynamic because they're not playing out at the Palace in Auburn Hills. They were right in the heart of Detroit where all the things that we know about are happening in terms of nightlife and restaurants. And so now it's just another piece of that developing entertainment zone.
Yeah, I mean, it's a finely tuned event that's very well organized, but the organic part of it is really cool. It's just the way people come down to the city, enjoy the event. A lot of people, it's similar to opening day. They don't necessarily go to the game, but you just kind of soak up the atmosphere downtown. And this NCAA event was just a huge hit because of that.
Well, and you mentioned opening day. We know as baseball fans that there's a handful of opening days in all of Major League Baseball that you count on as the benchmark. Detroit's always been one of them. And we know here in Detroit, it's a holiday. It's not just a day to see a game. The partying starts first thing in the morning and lasts until the last bar closes at night.
Absolutely, and it doesn't matter if it's 32 degrees or 70 or snowing sideways or the Tigers are terrible or the Tigers are great. Opening day is just a festival.
Well, and Detroit in our area really have become a magnet now for national events like that. Certainly the two Super Bowls we had, first in the Silverdome out in I think it was '81, and then of course the one we had here in 2006 at the new Ford Field. But those really were benchmark events in the Super Bowl world, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at both of them, the Superdome at the Silverdome is a new building back then, and then if you look at the Super Bowl at Ford Field, it was a Super Bowl in a northern city, and that was a reach by the NFL, but it went very well, it was very well organized, and people had a great time. They still talk about it.
From an operations standpoint, they said that was one of the most successful Super Bowls at any venue. The way it was run, the way it was convenient to everybody moving around, that the Detroit setting was very conducive to a good sports experience.
Yeah, really. I mean, the area being so tightly wound downtown where you can host all these events. When the Super Bowl comes to town, there's 70 plus ancillary events as they call them. So the game is one thing, but hosting all these events. So having that in a concentrated area like downtown Detroit is fantastic. And if you look at downtown Detroit in 2006, there was still plenty to do. But if you look at downtown Detroit in 2018,
right.
it's just exploding in terms of being an area where you can do so much. And as far as whether you're staging an event or whether you're a fan and want to enjoy it, there's just so much to do, and it really works well.
Well, going back to the 2005 All-Star Game, as you know, I've been to All-Star games all over the country, and that's become now a same 3-day event. Monday with the home run derby, Tuesday with the game, and Sunday with the day of practice and the other events. But in other cities, everything's spread out. In Detroit, everything was so compact. You could walk everywhere and be anywhere in 10 minutes. And it really was very convenient. And I think people like that from out of town.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at, and Detroit's going to have the NCAA Division I Wrestling Championships in 2022 at Little Caesars Arena. That event was here in 2007 at the Palace, and it was very successful and set attendance records. But if you think about bringing that event to downtown Detroit and everything the fans can enjoy around the event in downtown, it's just going to be another fantastic event.
Well, and we've also hosted several of the big golf events. Obviously, Oakland Hills is one of the. They haven't hosted a big event in a number of years, but they hosted a Ryder Cup and U.S. Opens. Now that's not a Detroit entity, but how does that affect the Detroit visitorship when you see in Oakland Hills out in Birmingham draw that kind of a crowd?
Well, I mean, you get a few things from that. I mean, the national attention. You're looking live at Oakland Hills, that sort of effect. But also in terms of kind of the hospitality side of it, people come in and not only do they rent hotels and things, they rent homes from people who rent their homes out.
The Ryder Cup was really the benchmark. 'Cause talk about an international flavor on an event.
Absolutely. So, it's just another positive thing. There's a lot of things behind the scenes that are great for the economic impact that you don't see. I mean, if you think of all the staging and rigging and everything that has to be done to make these events happen, that wouldn't be happening if there were just, the regular members golfing at Oakland Hills. But when you bring a big event into town, there's 2-3 weeks of setup, and there's, great work for crews and things like that. So it's just a tremendous economic impact, but just the buzz it creates, everyone coming into town.
The Ryder Cup, they set up a stage on the north course, an actual pavilion with seating, because that's where they had the opening ceremonies, closing ceremonies. So you're right, it creates a lot of ancillary work to do. But of course, I'm building to something here as we start talking about the international event. And that, of course, is the World Cup, which you were a very instrumental part of helping to produce. But did that really put us on the map, you think, on the world view of a city that can host that level of events?
I mean, in an international sense, absolutely, because Detroit internationally is auto and different things like that, to some degree the arts and things like that, music. But the World Cup brought a different stage to Detroit. So for months and months and months, international media were coming in on a daily basis to do advance stories, even before the event started to happen. And if you recall, that was the first time World Cup games were played indoor on natural grass.
And that was a big deal, right? Because they had to develop the natural grass. They didn't have that. And I think in cooperation with Michigan State, they developed a new breed of grass just for that game.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at how that impacted the sports world, so the Michigan State University, science professors and grass folks, produced that grass and had a system that made that work. Well, that same system on a little bit of a different level is now at the stadium that the Arizona Cardinals play on, and they actually roll in and out the natural grass. So
and
they're
those
playing
pods
in a dome.
They developed at the Silverdome.
Well, in the Phoenix case, it's a full field,
right.
But at the Silverdome, it was a pod system. But that's evolved, and Detroit, Pontiac, Michigan State was a trendsetter in that, and now that's a model for the world.
Little known fact: that grass that was grown on the floor of the Silverdome is now down at Belle Isle, correct? So you can go down and walk around the field that they played on at the Silverdome.
Absolutely, and there's a logo there. The World Cup logo is still there. In fact, in 2012, when Alexi Lawless was in to help promote the Gold Cup event that was going to be at the Silverdome, we had an opportunity to take Alexi back to Belle Isle and see the surface, and he just thought that was wonderful. And he took a couple pictures and tweeted it out, and just thought it was a really cool piece of history.
And I think some of the most successful outdoor hockey games have been staged in Metro Detroit, either in Ann Arbor or at Detroit. So obviously it's a 4-season thing, not just in the warm weather months.
Yeah, and throughout the state. I mean, if you go back to mid 2000s, it was the Cold War. at Michigan State that kind of set the tone, at least in college hockey. And then the Big Chill between Michigan and Michigan State set the attendance record at that time in Michigan Stadium. And then obviously we've hosted the NHL Winter Classic at Comerica Park. So, I don't know if there's another state that's done all of that, whether it's crossing it, college hockey into pro hockey.
So here's the big question before we wrap up this edition of our LegacyCast. What's the next big event coming? Is it a Final Four basketball? Is it a Super Bowl? I haven't heard much about the rumors or the buzz. What, in your opinion, what's next to come back at that level?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things in play. I mean, obviously a future bid for the Super Bowl. The NCAA Final Four bid rotation goes back into the sort of mid-2020s. And then a couple other possibilities are college football national championship, Big Ten basketball championship, Big Ten football championship. So those are all somewhat in the mix in a different way, but those are all events that could and some will come to the area within the next 10 years.
I think we're pretty sure in saying that between the Ford Field, Comerica Park, and now Little Caesars, we have as good a venues in a tight area as anybody has in the country to offer to people that come in to stage those kind of events.
Absolutely, and if you think of how they can work together, so let's say an event is at Ford Field, but you have these these ancillary events, they could be hosted at Little Caesars Arena, or they could be hosted at Comerica Park. So that package downtown from a sports and entertainment perspective is really world class.
You really have 120,000 seats within a 3 or 4 block area is what you have.
And you also have things for theaters and things like that. I mean, the potential in the future is for the NFL draft to come here, and you can get very creative with that. That could be at the Fox. That could be it could be a variety of different
outdoors
places.
In a campus martius.
Could be outdoors in a non-traditional setting like they did in Philadelphia in the last year. It was in front of their art institute, made famous in the Rocky movie. But there's a lot of different things, and when the powers that be and the creative folks get together, you can really make a great blueprint for an event that's maybe never done before.
Well, I guess clearly, Kurt, while we've enjoyed a lot of the sports history that we've seen, more is to be written, as you said, now with these new developments in terms of arenas and fields. More is coming.
Absolutely, and there's a future generation that'll be able to enjoy this. So we're sitting here telling stories because we've experienced it, but there's another generation that'll experience a whole series of great sports events in Michigan.
Well, Kurt, great podcast today. Appreciate you joining us, and we're going to look forward to having you being a guest again soon on our LegacyCast. Once again, I'm Jim Stark, the Executive Director of the Michigan Sports Legacy Conservancy. View all of our LegacyCasts on our website at mislc.org, and we'll see you again with another edition of our LegacyCast.